Welcome back to Wartime Cafe. I'm your host, Laith Marouf, and you're watching Free Palestine TV. Before we continue with this episode, I ask you to press the subscribe button on whatever social media platform you're watching this on, and to go to our website, freepalestine.video, to donate so we can continue bringing you these episodes. With us today is returning guest, Steve Sweeney, Russia Today reporter in Lebanon. Thank you very much, Steve, for coming back to sit down for this talk. And welcome back safely to Lebanon. We heard that you had some experience with the authorities in the UK when you went back visiting your family in the country. Tell us about that. And before you do this, I encourage everybody to go watch our first episode, sit down on Wartime Cafe, to know more about your history of working in the media. And because usually our guests get to tell about their background, but now we've had that sit down with you. Yeah. Tell us about this experience with the authorities in the UK.
Well, this is going back to July now, July the 11th, and I took a flight from Beirut to London. And I remember actually the day of the flight itself, when I checked in at Rabih International Airport, there was something a little bit unusual at the check-in desk, in that they took my passport and they took it away and they scanned it in a machine. And this never happened to me before, actually. I'm not entirely sure why they did it. They said that this was at the request of the British authorities. So I knew that my details and my flight data and everything was being sent through to London. I kind of didn't think too much of it at the time, just that it was a little bit unusual. And then at the check-in at the gates, they had another layer of security to go through. Again, sometimes this happens, sometimes it doesn't. So I didn't think too much of it, and I had a nice, pleasant flight. It was a short flight. I was very relaxed. And when I got off the plane, immediately as I came through the tunnel, when they connect to the plane, I was accosted almost straight away by two guys in semi-casual clothes, and they asked me, bizarrely, where I'd come from, which was amazing, seeing that I just got off the plane from Beirut.
It's a direct flight.
Yeah, it was a direct flight. So so I told them, yes, Beirut, and they asked for my passport, and instantly they asked me some kind of questions. What do you do? Why are you coming back here? I said, to visit family. And then when they said, who do you work for? What do you do? I knew straight away then that this was not a routine stop, a routine check. They deliberately targeted me. They came there specifically to meet me. They handed me a leaflet and said that you're now detained under whatever it was, Section 3 of the Counter-Terrorism Act, and we're going to take you to a room here in Heathrow Airport for a discussion. But it wasn't a voluntary discussion, they make out as though it's voluntary, but if you refuse to go, then they just arrest you. And all of the things that they do along the way, they make out as though they're voluntary. Oh, you're not under arrest. They stress that quite often. They say you're detained for the purposes of investigation. However, if you refuse to comply with any of our requests, and they had a list, refusing to hand over your equipment, 3 months in prison, a refusal to have your fingerprints taken, the similar kind of things, and they kind of scaled upwards. So there was no kind of sense that this was voluntary at all. I didn't have the right to remain silent. They made that very clear. You have to answer our questions.
Wow.
There was no right to having a solicitor present. There was no right. They kind of said that I could call a solicitor for advice if I wanted to, but again, that was restricted and limited. Now, they did indeed take me to a room for interrogation, as I called it, because that's what it was. It wasn't a friendly chat with them, although they did the kind of thing where they were trying to make out as though they were really friendly. They were just interested in my work and what I'm doing and this kind of thing. So they started two strands of conversation. But first of all, they took my DNA. They took a DNA swab from my mouth. Wow. They took my fingerprints. They took photographs from lots of different angles, and they rotated the people that were interrogating me. They tried to make this connection with me. They think we're stupid, when they try and act as our friend, being really friendly. I'm really interested in what you do. So of course I gave them the information that they wanted in a very limited way. I didn't give them too much of the details of what I was doing, very obviously. But they asked me, the first line of questioning was around my connections to Russia. They know that I work for RT, Russia Today, as it's known by globally, I guess, by people who recognize it by that name. So they started asking me if I have contact with Russian officials. Do Russian officials instruct me to say things, to do things? Have I come to Britain to do some kind of work on behalf of Russia? They were very interested in my financial situation, money that I pay or may pay to my daughter, to my family in Britain. And of course, I'm not stupid again. I don't use any kind of money from Russia to pay for that kind of thing. So I don't have a British bank account because 2 years ago they closed that down. An account I'd held since I was 14 years old was closed down without any kind of warning, just because of my associations with Russia. So they asked me a lot about that. They asked, some of the questions are fairly stupid. They asked, does my employer tell me what to do? I said, well, any employer tells you what to do. That's the kind of employer and employee relationship. Of course, sometimes they will ask me to do things in the studio. Sometimes they will send me on assignment somewhere. They asked me what cities in Russia, I knew what they were getting at, what cities in Russia I'd worked in. So I told them, Voronezh, Rostov-on-Don, St. Petersburg, Ingushetia, various places that I've worked. What they really wanted to know was about my work in Donetsk and Donbass. But of course, according to them, they're Ukrainian cities. So I answered their question honestly.
Yeah.
So, on their terms. So I didn't mention anything about Donbass and Donetsk, although of course they are well aware of that. They know the answers to the questions that they're asking me already. So they kind of pushed on that for a little bit, and then they came on to my work in Lebanon, and they pretended, it's what's happening in Lebanon is terrible, and they asked about Hezbollah. They said Hezbollah. Well, Hezbollah is defeated, isn't it? And I said, yeah, well, according to the Western narrative, it's defeated, but Hezbollah is not defeated. And I kind of expressed my views on that fairly robustly, and said that you have to understand that Hezbollah are the people. If you go to the south, of course, Hezbollah has mass support, and there's a very good reason that Hezbollah has mass support. And that's because they're the only force that is defending them from their neighbour. The Zionist entity that not just sits on their border, but encroaches into their land and has done since its inception. So we didn't go into too much detail about that, but one of them said that he admired my work, which was astonishing for me. I'm sure. I'm sure he's had. I'm sure he's seen the extent of my films, my writing, and all this kind of thing. So they focused on that, and then they started asking me, so you're a communist? Okay, yeah. So what does that mean to you? What does it mean to be a communist? And these people have they don't understand what communism is really. I mean, so I explained I'm a member of a communist party in Britain, a very small one. And again, I didn't go into too much detail. I said, but it's not illegal to be a communist in Britain. Not yet, anyway. I'm sure the way things are moving, it soon will be illegal to be a communist in Britain. It's illegal to be pretty much anything else at the moment. So they asked about that, and then they said, "Do you love your country? Do you love your?
Wow.
Are you? Why do you come back? And I said, I hate my country. I hate the government. I said, I love the people. The people are very friendly. I have family here. I grew up here. I have friends here. I love them, and every time I'm back, of course, I feel welcome. This is my community, my people. But I said, I hate the government. I hate everything it stands for. I hate everything that it does, everything that it's doing right now. It's one of the leading components of the genocide of Palestinians. It's not just complicit. It's active. It's an active participant. I see the end result of this every single day in southern Lebanon. I see the end result of the intelligence that is supplied by Britain. I see the end result of the weapons that are supplied by Britain, the political support, all of these kind of things. I see the end result. So of course I hate them. I mean, but it's my right to do that. Actually, yes, as a British citizen, it's you keep saying we live in a democracy. In a democracy, you can hate your government. In a democracy, you can change your government, and you can fight to change your government. all of these things are true, but they kind of had this, I don't know, for them, of course, that notion is abhorrent. Of course, they don't think that you can do any of these kind of things, and they work to try and prevent you from doing any of these kind of things. So,
this is Beirut life.
Exactly.
The guy is blasting the music.
I mean, it's Saturday night in Beirut. Come on, yallah. This is to be expected. But their questions were, of course, incredibly restrictive, and they started talking again about how I feel about Hezbollah, how I feel about resistance organisations, and they seized all of my electronic devices, the mobile phone, laptop, iPad, my Apple Watch, everything, everything. And of course, they saw my screensaver on one of my phones, which was a picture of me with Said Hassan Nasrallah.
Oh, yes.
Actually, it was taken with Hadi when we were in the south a few years ago now, and right on the border. And they said, "Yes, but you're flashing the peace sign." I said, "Yeah, so what? This is normal. This is, what are you implying?" So the insinuation was again,
it wasn't with the actual Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, was
sorry,
it?
it was a giant billboard.
Yes,
on,
a billboard.
Right on the border. It wasn't with,
yes.
with the man himself. So of course they asked me, what I think about Hezbollah, what I think about Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, whether I have connections with Hezbollah officials, senior figures within Hezbollah, and I said, "Come on, you're crazy. Nobody has those kind of contacts."
He would know if he had. Anyways.
Yeah, exactly. And I said, of course, I have contacts with some officials and some figures within Hezbollah. I'm a journalist. This is my job. Of course, I have contacts with people that I find very unpalatable, but I have contact with them because I'm not saying Hezbollah. I'm not putting them in that category. But here in Lebanon, of course, there are some parties that I abhor, but I would have some maybe limited contact with them for journalistic purposes. Their press team only. I mean, I'm not talking about members of that organisation, but sometimes you even come across them in the streets or whatever, and you speak to them. So of course, they were very interested in my links to Hezbollah, to Ansar Allah, to Hashd al-Shabi. They which of course I have connections to. I've reported and worked in Yemen. I've reported and worked in Iraq. I've reported and worked in Lebanon
and in Donbass.
Yeah. And I have contacts with all of these organisations. I've interviewed Palestine Islamic Jihad. I've interviewed people from Hamas. I mean, this is
That's what journalism is.
This is the job of a journalist. The BBC has done these things, okay? I mean, they have interviewed Hamas figures before. So, I mean, it's not like it's unusual. This is the role of any journalist, especially working in this region, is to have contacts with those organisations. All media organisations do, not just me, not just RT, but of course, it's a different context when it's me, of course. They think that it blurs the line, that it crosses from journalism into activism, from reporting into support. That's the kind of thing that they're trying to hang on me. So
this questioning went on in the airport.
Yes.
And when did it become clear that you were not going to get out that night?
I did get out that night. The legislation allows them to question me for up to 6 hours. Mm-hmm. This particular part of the legislation. And again, they kept reiterating you're not under arrest, but they kept extending it. And the reason for that is because they were trying to get more information, and they realised then we might have something on this guy. And eventually I was allowed to go, but of course I had nothing. I had no devices, and it's actually very restrictive, losing access to all your contacts and even like finances, because everything now is linked to your smartphone. So I had no access to anything, but I eventually made it back home. I arrived 2 or 3 in the morning, and
how long was the questioning?
They held me for the maximum time they could, and then they had to let me go. And they said they're carrying out their investigations. They'll be searching my devices for whatever evidence they need. And so I realised, okay, this is serious now. But I'd made a promise to my daughter to take her to a concert, and I'm not going to break that promise. So I stayed for a few days, but I was always conscious that I was either being watched, surveyed, followed. Something was going to happen, that my mother's house, which is where I was staying, was going to be raided at any minute. So I took my daughter to the concert in London. I took her back home, and as soon as I dropped her off, I left. So I escaped the country via, I thought, where can I go? Because Europe now is not a safe place for journalists or for people that are pro-Palestine. So I couldn't connect through Germany, for example. I couldn't connect through France.
It's one of the worst places, Germany.
Germany's
those cops are total Nazi in the streets.
I couldn't travel through any of the Gulf states. So I found a flight to Ethiopia. I thought, now here we go. This is going to throw them off guard, for one. Yeah. For two, if they get their shit together and they decide, well, we'll stop him in Addis Ababa, we'll stop him there. The country's in collapse. It doesn't function. It's like, I thought, even if they do that, they're not going to get their shit together to do that, to detain me. And I was right. They didn't. So I went this long flight via Addis Ababa, and then I only really felt safe when the plane took off from Addis Ababa. The plane taxied in Heathrow for about an hour, by the way. Wow. Officials kept getting on the plane and reading out passenger names to report to officials, and I was like, I was messaging my girlfriend and saying, she used to be working as cabin crew, and I was like, is this normal? And she was like, no, okay. So I was kind of panicking a little bit. But anyway, when I landed back, I'm always so excited and so happy to be back in Lebanon. Every time I have the biggest smile on my face, and I'm always happy to be back here. But this time was just incredible. And I walked through passport control, and the guy there, he looked at me, smiled, stamped my passport and said, "Yalla, welcome." And it was the best Yalla welcome I've ever heard. So I arrived back in Lebanon, but now effectively,
they still have all your equipment.
They have everything. So I'm under investigation for terrorist activities.
This is now how many days? A month? And
it's 2 months now.
2 months now.
2 months now. Yeah, 2 months now.
And this can go on indefinitely.
Indefinitely. I had a letter through recently to my mother's house, pretty much saying that it's taking longer. They're gathering more information. They're speaking to other agencies, outside bodies. So this means it's very serious. And
the Mossad and the
exactly.
So Ukrainian intelligence.
For context, the legislation in Britain now is so restrictive that just one of the photographs they have of me, just one of them, carries a potential 14-year jail sentence. Now, I've got a lot of those kind of photos because of my journalistic work. I've been, as we said, I've been in all of the countries that form the axis of resistance. I have contacts with all of those people from the axis of resistance. I'm a member of a political party. This is outside of my journalism that supports the axis of resistance. I've given speeches in various places, various countries, saying that, with the stance of victory to the resistance, that this is something that I guess maybe concerns them a little bit. But I'm not going to hold back. I'm not holding back on that. So the potential for me to go to prison is very realistic. So I'm effectively now I've been exiled from the country of my birth. They deem me to be a terrorist for what? For opposing a genocide.
Well,
that's what it comes down to.
You're now joining a good company of a list of many journalists and activists that have been arrested in the UK, in Europe, in Switzerland, which is in Europe, obviously, and in Austria.
Yeah.
We had Craig Murray, Ali Abu Naame, Richard Medhurst, and amongst many others.
Yeah.
So how can we evaluate press freedoms right now in the West?
Press freedom in the West has been eroded over a very long time. I mean, the very notion of press freedom in the West is a myth. I mean, there's never really been what you would describe press freedom in the West. You look at the role of the media, the control of the media. I mean, the mainstream media, I don't like using that term too much, to be honest with you, but when you don't have a plurality of the media, it's owned by a very small group of people, and that small group of people now push their editorial line in every kind of corner of the media, and that's whether it's like newspapers, television, even social media now. Of course, is driven by this. And you can look at, for example, people talk about the BBC and BBC impartiality, and again, that's a myth back from its foundation. The BBC was founded by Royal Charter.
But you know those BBC journalists they were interviewing the same people that you were interviewing. They were MI6 before they became journalists.
Well, this is the point I was actually going to make. Was that MI5 vetted BBC employees, certainly up until the 80s, early 90s, that we know of. I mean, this isn't like some conspiracy theory. This is in the public domain. And it would be foolish to think that they're not doing the same now. Newspapers had what they call MI5 intelligence contacts. Journalists working within those news organisations were contacts. The BBC itself, the Information Research Department, which was a very shady part of the British government, set up this bizarre network between the BBC and Reuters, where they were paying Reuters via the BBC, via the Information Research Department, to set up these kind of news organisations, both in South America, Latin America, and in West Asia, to promote British interests. I mean, they were quite open about it. Look at what happened in Syria, when the BBC was paying stringers. Some of them didn't even know that they were doing it, training them, giving them camera equipment, and they were filming Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, for example, but the myriad of jihadist organisations in Syria, the White Helmets, and these kind of people, and they were filming them to show, oh, look at the rebels, aren't they good people? And then the BBC would then simply recycle it and say, look, this has come from local journalists. So there's never been this kind of thing about press freedom has been a myth. Press freedom only exists it's an abstract freedom, okay? Because me and you, we like free speech. We both have the same right to freedom of speech, but we can't exercise it in an equal way. Rupert Murdoch has the right to free speech. I have the right to free speech, but I don't own a mass network of television, media companies, and newspapers. So of course, it's an abstract freedom. We can't talk about it in any other way, really. But now, okay, we can talk about now how it's been restricted even further, I guess, when you look at the arrest and detention of people like myself, like Craig Murray, who you mentioned, Richard Medhurst, people that may be seen as on the fringe rather than in the mainstream.
And how about like the duty and the role of these quote-unquote mainstream journalists in covering
They're cowards. These people are cowards.
Cowards. So they're not even, okay, let's presume they're cowards and they're cowards. Cannot cover the truth. But how about covering the arrests and mass killing of journalists in Palestine and in Lebanon, above and beyond the hundreds that are, injured? We only hear the 250, 270 almost Palestinian journalists that are killed, but there's hundreds that are injured. So what about that? How can we assess the journalist unions?
I'll talk to you about back in 2021 or 2. I forget. I'm an old man. My brain, my dates are not my thing. But if you cast your mind back to a time when Israel was launching another wave of aggression in Gaza against the Palestinians, and you remember it blew up a media tower that hosted Al Jazeera, this kind of thing. It killed thousands of Palestinians, again with barely a murmur from the BBC or other organisations. It was a footnote. They couldn't have cared less about the killing of these journalists. They couldn't have cared less about the killing of Palestinians. But even worse, I was a member of the National Union of Journalists at the time in Britain, which is where I was working. At their National Delegates Conference, I moved a motion to set up a Media Workers for Palestine. And this was supposed to be like a solidarity network. One of the things that I proposed was that we twin journalist to journalist with Palestinian journalists. This was for a number of reasons. One, to raise the profile of the journalists. another to raise the profile of their work as journalists, so that the reality of the ground in Palestine was being reflected in the British media. Okay. The other thing was, if anything happened to them, we could instantly spring into action to campaign. If they were arrested or something, for example, you would have and I was twinned with a journalist. So it was really kind of to do that, also to stand in solidarity with the Palestinians, but it also called for the journalist union to stop making trips to Jerusalem, to stop making trips to Israel. And this was not just a call from us, this was a call from the Palestinian Journalist Union themselves. And we were told no. The executive of the union, they squashed it. And they called us extremists. So you couldn't even get a journalist union to stand in solidarity with the Palestinians. You see it now, even actually, where there have been protests in solidarity with the Palestinian journalists that have been killed. They've been organised by individual branches of that journalist, the NUJ, not the NUJ itself. They were silent over Julian Assange, did nothing. They didn't lift a finger when Julian Assange was in Belmarsh high security prison, when his case was ongoing. Nothing. There was nothing. So
we could even say that some of those journalists worked to get Assange into jail by
of course, I mean, you saw the language of The Guardian. I mean, the Guardian, who benefited from Julian Assange's, from WikiLeaks, that trove of documents and data that came out right at the start. Of course, The Guardian was publishing it for their own purposes, but as soon as Assange was arrested, they threw him under the bus. And they refused to call him a journalist. They said that he was, a threat to national security, this kind of thing. So these people they're cowards. These people are cowards. And if you had, if they had an ounce of integrity as journalists, where are they? Why aren't they coming to Lebanon, for example? Why aren't they coming to southern Lebanon? Which national news organisation or international news organisations, are coming into southern Lebanon? None. One, actually. RT.
We've heard that excuse about why journalists are not in Gaza. And it's, the Israelis are not letting us in.
Make them let you in.
But they decide to breach borders and go into Syria and Sudan and so on. Whenever
they breach
wars.
Borders and come into southern Lebanon.
Exactly. From inside Palestine, occupied Palestine, journalists cross with the Israeli military into occupied Lebanon.
Yeah,
but they don't want to cross into Gaza without the permission of master in Tel Aviv.
Exactly.
That's one. The other thing is that clearly they have the ability to come to the South Lebanon, so there's no excuse.
There's no excuse for them at all.
And they do not want to cover the plight of the people in South Lebanon and those destroyed villages. So you have also obviously faced some dangers while doing your job in the south of Lebanon. Can you mention some of those things for our audience? Some of those minutes that were a little bit testy when you were in South?
Well, I mean, to put it into context, I think it's important to say that the southern Lebanon, the war never ended in southern Lebanon. The war's never ended there. The ceasefire doesn't exist in southern Lebanon. Every single day there are violations, whether it's a drone strike on a car, an Israeli incursion, buildings being destroyed, airstrikes targeting homes, targeting construction vehicles, not just the construction vehicles like individually, but they're also targeting the manufacturing or the warehouses where they're being stored or where they're being repaired. Obviously, to prevent the people from returning, from rebuilding their land. Even now, I was down in Aita recently, and some of the other border villages, we went with an organisation that is funding the reconstruction, because the government won't fund it. So people are doing it themselves, but they're like constructing a wall in a home in southern Lebanon is deemed to be, by Israel, they deem it as a threat, so they destroy it. So even building anything in the south is now a dangerous activity for people. I mean, I don't want to talk about what's happened to myself too much. I'm a journalist, and it's my job to do this. It's my job to go there and to report on what's happening in southern Lebanon. It's my job to raise the voices of the people in those communities. But every time we do this, as I understand, we're the only television crew that has been down there regularly and filmed the expansion of the military outposts, the illegal military bases built inside Lebanese sovereign territory. Now, we filmed them since the end of the ceasefire. In fact, we were there just last week. Every time we go there, Israel flies a drone over us, whether it's an attack drone or a surveillance drone. Every time they do it, we know why they do it. They're doing it to try and intimidate us. So, but it won't work. And so we experience that regularly. In fact, yesterday, even Friday, in Hula, a drone was flown over us when we were filming there. So this happens pretty much constantly. It's a constant danger. And even as a journalist, okay, look, more journalists should go there, but they have to realise, that it is dangerous, that your life can be snuffed out like that, just at a whim of an Israeli who doesn't like you.
Well, up until now, the Israelis haven't killed a Western,
not a Western journalist. Yeah, so maybe there's some protection in that. Yeah. Which then means it's my duty to use that. The fact that I am a Westerner and that I do have a privilege, then I should use that to go into southern Lebanon to report on what's happening there. But they've shot us again in Hula, the day of the. It was in February, and the villagers were returning en masse to their land, right, to their land. And we were with them because we always go where the people go, we go. And as we arrived, we went over. There was a mound there. There had been previously a Merkava tank behind there, which had gone. But the destruction was something else really. But people were returning sometimes for the first time in 18 months. They were returning to find what was left of their homes, and the Israelis shot them. They shot the villagers as they tried to return. These were unarmed civilians, very clearly and very obviously unarmed civilians. As we got there, they shot dead a teenage girl. They left her dying for 24 hours. They left her on the ground dying, lifeless and alone. Her family could watch. They couldn't recover her body. The civil defence, the paramedics were going to try and recover the body. They were being shot at. We filmed all of this. We saw it with our own eyes. We saw everything that was happening. Paramedics coming back, being treated by their colleagues. Journalists, as we went in, of course, they opened fire on us. These weren't warning shots. These were shots. They were shooting to kill. But again, it's not about us. It's not about me as a journalist. It's about their absolute disregard for human life. Now, you go into Hula, and I was there yesterday. I've been there many, many times, filmed there many times. And I know this is slightly off the risk, but I was there for in Hula in 1948, in October 1948. So this is the fledgling state of Israel. They came into Hula. The women and the children had already been evacuated. They rounded up all of the men in that village. They tied their hands behind their back and they shot them. And then they collapsed the house that they were that they were killed in. The bodies were left undiscovered. People couldn't recognize their bodies for months. People were recognized by their clothes, this kind of thing. And as I went back there, I went to the memorial for the people that were killed there. These are the relatives of the people that live there still today. This is a community that lived on that land for generations. And what had Israel done? They destroyed that memorial. They'd graffitied the Star of David on that memorial. They'd written on it in graffiti, "The only good Shiite is a dead Shiite." So don't let people, convince you that this started on October the 7th or on October the 8th. This is history being played out over and over and over and over again. And so the threats that we face, of course, okay, the drones, the bombings, we were very close to, and we've been very close to the bombings both in the south of Lebanon and in Dahia as well. But this is daily life for people here. And we're here to
clearly
record that, to
the
record daily life
Zionists
of
have,
people.
as you said, have no respect for life, period. And in fact, when you see graffitis like this, the only good Shia is a dead Shia, it shows you how Zionists are actually worse than Nazis, because the Nazis used to say the only good Jew is a dead Jew.
Yeah.
And they have now surpassed the Nazi crimes, the Zionists, in the way they're the highest number of dead, journalists, highest number of killed medics, and in the history of warfare.
More journalists killed more Palestinian journalists killed than in the First World War, the Second World War, the Iraq War, Afghanistan, Vietnam, everything, all of those put together.
Wars since World War I combined together.
More
the
journalists killed in
largest
Gaza.
Cohort of
in just 2 years
amputees in the history of humanity.
And
This is never ending,
Yeah.
and we assessed right now how this media in the West is failing to do its duty, like you are doing your duty.
Yeah.
How about societies in the West, the reaction to 2 years of genocide? Can we assess the success or failure of these civil movements that we're seeing?
Well, I think we can talk about society and the civil movements separately in a way, I guess, because you look now at ordinary people, as we call them in Britain. You look at how they're reacting and responding. And of course, they're reacting and responding with absolute horror. Now, more people have woken up to the fact that Israel is a genocidal state. More people than I can ever remember, are now kind of awake to this. More people are now opposing Israel's actions, opposing the genocide. So I think there's more generally more of an awareness. I think Israel will never be seen the same ever again. But when we talk about the civil society organizations, I mean, we can talk about a number of them, whether it's the trade unions, whether it's the anti-war movement, the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, these kind of things. Now, I'm very critical of these organizations because, okay, we can take the anti-war movement. The biggest mass movement in history, they called it. If you recall back to the invasion of Iraq, 2003, 2 million people on the streets of London. And they give themselves a great pat on the back when they talk about this. And of course, this was a huge moment in history, but it was a moment absolutely squandered. Okay, you have 2 million people on the streets of London, but the Iraq War still happened. It still happened. You didn't stop it. And you have the power to stop it, actually.
You can just take over the parliament. They clap when demonstrators in Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or Indonesia or somewhere in Africa take over the parliament of their government and overthrow it. But they have 2 million people surrounding the parliament of the UK and they don't want to do nothing.
They don't do anything. I mean, this is for me, this is one of the marks of what's happened since October the 7th. Huge outpouring of solidarity with the Palestinian people. You saw people, new groups of people, younger people coming out on the streets. You saw the Muslim community, the Palestinian diaspora. Many people were coming out on the streets. But that movement, instead of developing and growing into something, was straitjacketed immediately. And it's by the same people that have repeated the same formula for the past, 20 odd years, over and over and over again. What should we do? Let's go for a walk in London on a Saturday. Okay, what does that achieve? You don't shut the city down. Parliament isn't even in session. Downing Street is empty. There are tourists about on the streets of London. And you go for a walk and you listen to the same people delivering the same speeches over and over and over again. We're 2 years into a genocide now. 2 years. And this is all that we have. Now, they've tightened control over that movement so much that people, I don't know, maybe I was a frequent speaker on these kind of platforms when I was back in the UK, but my position now would probably be untenable. I would probably not be allowed to on a platform.
There's a lot of people that are banned from
voices,
speaking.
Craig Murray is persona non grata. George Galloway, persona non grata. Anybody that says anything that is slightly radical, that is slightly critical of the Labour Party or the trade unions or even the movement itself, somebody that offers a vision or something that's different. So, for example, now, the party I belong to, the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, our comrades have been arrested, homes have been raided. Why? For giving out leaflets saying victory to the resistance. But that's the only position that should be taken by the mass movement. You have a mass movement now. You have people here in Lebanon, people are dying. People are giving their blood. People are being martyred for the Palestinian cause. Ansar Allah, you look at Ansar Allah in Yemen. They went from a very tiny group of people with barely a gun between them. They're now launching hypersonic ballistic missiles at Palestine. People are making huge, huge sacrifices for the people of Gaza, for the Palestinians. They're paying with their lives, their homes, everything, everything. Yet in Britain is one of the leading participants in the genocide of the Gazan people, if not the leading participant, actually.
And the original sin falls on Britain.
The original sin falls on Britain. The original sin falls on Britain. But you have in Britain a trade union movement. Okay, it's not as strong as it was in the 70s, the early 80s. It took many defeats over those years. Thatcher went to work destroying the miners' union, but it's still 6 million strong. And it's manufacturing the weapons, the arms, the missiles, the bullets that are raining down not just on the people of Gaza, but here in Lebanon too. They transport those weapons. They use the rail networks, the shipping networks. But you have trade unions that are organising those workers. Now they could easily, and it doesn't just need to be those workers. I mean, this is just a starting point. Shut down the munitions factories. Refuse to make weapons or arms that are bound for Israel.
They can order their members definitely to do so.
Shut them down.
Work
you can look at
stoppage.
all of the ports. We know where they are. We know the ports that are shipping these weapons.
And a lot of these unions have passed the BDS long time ago.
But they don't support it.
But a lot of them did pass
They can pass
a motion
anything.
for BDS.
They pass motions in support.
But they
of all
haven't
sorts.
taken action,
But
really.
they won't take action. They won't put those kind of things into action.
So they wouldn't take action to do work stoppage or blocking, let's say, the ports that they run
Strike
as
action,
unions.
block the ports or anything.
They also haven't divested their retirement funds.
No, they're still doing all of this. But anybody that is raising the issue of Palestine, even within the trade union organisations themselves, I spoke about what happened to me in the NUJ, the Journalist Union. They actually blocked me from being elected to the executive committee as well for spurious reasons. But anybody that falls foul of that is deemed an extremist. Behind the scenes, we know that general secretaries are silencing their members. They're working, using the bureaucratic machinations of their organisation to stop certain resolutions from reaching the conference floor, to stop them from passing, to kick them in the long grass, to target individuals within the union that are raising these kind of issues. There's a very good reason for this, but you look at the trade unions in Britain, the biggest trade unions, Unite, Unison, GMB, they're the three largest. Or you can look at those. Every single one of them is paying millions. We're talking big sums of money to the Labour Party, the very Labour Party in government, the very Labour Party whose leader said Israel has the right to starve Palestinians, to withhold food, to withhold water, to withhold medicine. They're paying millions to that party, to that government. So these trade unions again, and in fact I would say anybody that votes for the Labour Party, anyone that funds the Labour Party, anyone that gives money to an external organisation that donates to the Labour Party, they are also complicit in what's happening in Gaza. They are also complicit in what's happening in Lebanon. Just across the water from here, of course, we have RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus. I'm astonished people don't know what's happening there. The newspapers in Britain, the media in Britain are simply not reporting. This is one of the biggest.
Yeah, there's only UK, declassified UK that is covering this story.
Yeah,
and none of the
good
mainstream.
friends there, Matt Kennard, Phil Miller, they're doing some excellent work. But of course, the media, they catch up eventually when they have to. But from RAF Akrotiri, it's the biggest British military base outside of Britain. Now, I happened when I was back in Britain, when I was detained, I had a conversation with somebody, an RAF employee, who said, "You don't know half of what's going on there." the weapons and the military hardware and the aircraft that are being taken to RAF Akrotiri that you don't know about, that is being taken there in great secrecy. Now, of course, this is, what people don't understand perhaps is that RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus, this kind of area is actually British sovereign territory. Doesn't even belong to Cyprus, it belongs to Britain. British sovereign territory within Cyprus. And it's being used, one, as a spy network across the whole of this region, whether it's in Syria, in Iran. Of course, we know, me and you know, about the R1 spy planes that are flying over Gaza, that are collating information. They flew over before the killing of Al Jazeera journalists, hours before. They flew over Greta Thunberg's flotilla just before the Israelis intercepted it. They won't tell me. I've requested information about the flight plans and the flight data for the time preceding the assassination of Syed Hassan Nasrallah, because I'm very, very sure that they will be involved in that. They're flying down the coast of Lebanon and southern Lebanon. So Britain is up to its neck in this, but this is being kept secret from the British public. The media and journalists, quite simply and quite frankly, aren't doing their jobs in reporting.
So the unions are not doing their job.
The unions aren't. The anti-war movement isn't.
The anti-war movement is not doing their job. There's Palestine Action, which was...
They are doing their job.
Doing their job, and they were doing it even within the confines of non-violence in terms of...
But Palestine Action is an interesting... they were doing what these other organisations should have been doing. They were taking direct action to stop a genocide, to whatever they were doing, whether they were damaging warplanes or preventing them from being able to take off. I mean, Britain has a long and proud history of this kind of thing, going back to the Jolly George in 1920, when in London, the workers were being asked to load munitions onto ships set for Poland, which were to be used by the 20 or so countries that were trying to crush the Russian Revolution there. And they formed a Hands Off Russia campaign. They refused to handle those munitions. They refused to load the ships, and eventually the British government was forced to back down. You can look at during the
suffragettes also.
You can look at the suffragettes, but even in more recent history, you can look at the workers at the Rolls-Royce factory in Scotland. There's a movie about this called Ne Passaran, and I highly recommend people watch this, because this was where trade unionists refused to handle engines and parts for planes that were being used by the United States, by Augusto Pinochet's regime, to bomb the people of Chile, to overthrow Salvador Allende. So they refused to handle those parts. Now, of course, this was a small group of workers, and they had a limited success, but they had a success. Now, the Palestine Action really are the modern day version of these heroic workers that took these actions in the past.
You'd think that with Palestine Action taking these actions of going into these factories and destroying some of the machinery, that would have motivated these unions to say, hey, in order for us to stop destruction, we're going to do work stoppage. That they would have, it opened space for them to fill these unions.
Well, this was something that should have been done in tandem. We know behind the scenes that that Palestine Action and the action that they were taking was condemned by the trade unions. They condemned the actions that they were taking rather than supporting them. They were condemning them.
Because that probably emboldened Starmer to bring the law to vote.
Yeah.
Because he knew then the labor unions are behind them to condemn Palestine Action as a terrorist group.
I mean, this was the craziest move. I mean, look, we've been through this kind of period before with the anti-war movement, when Britain was, you could say, more directly involved, because it had troops on the ground to overthrow the Iraqi government, Saddam Hussein, and then we know what they did there, and the war crimes and the atrocities that they committed. But even in that, under Tony Blair, there were restrictions, of course. and there were restrictions over the right to protest. You remember Brian Hoare, who had his peace camp in Parliament Square, and he was the last one, but they shifted that kind of thing. But there was still a little bit more of a window to exercise that right to protest. Now, you have Palestine Action as a terrorist organisation. You have 83-year-old women, priests or vicars or whatever, being arrested for holding up a sign saying, "I support Palestine Action." Hundreds of people now being arrested. Just this week,
even today,
a young lawyer was arrested for speaking in an online Zoom meeting, advising that it was okay to protest against a prescription. And the police raided his home and took him away.
Yeah, I saw that video. And also today, Saturday, is the usual weekly demonstrations in London. And there was 1,500 people carrying signs saying, "I support Palestine Action and I am against genocide." And it got ridiculous because there was a lot of people with disabilities in wheelchairs, blind and so forth, and elders that were being arrested. But the police still didn't arrest that 1,500 people because that would have overwhelmed the jail system, the court system, the whole system as a whole, and which leaves the question out there: why aren't these organizers of these demos just letting everybody carry I support Palestine Action, which would make the law null and void? Are they that collaborative with the system, really? And they're just wasting people's energy?
We can speculate about that, but you can judge them by their actions. That's I think very simply whether they're doing it knowingly or unknowingly. Of course, I mean, do they pose a threat to the state? Of course not. How does a march on a Saturday, a walk in the park on a Saturday, pose a threat to the state? This is the centre. Britain is one of the centres of imperialist power in the world. It's a junior one now to the Americans, but it's still a centre of imperialist power. And the people there have a duty and a responsibility, really, I think, to the people of this land, really, to do more than walk in the sunshine or the rain, as it usually is in London. But they have a duty to do more. Now you can question, well, are these people? Because it's the same people, it's the same faces, and it doesn't matter which demonstration it is. They just put on a different hat for that demonstration.
It's the great gatekeepers that have been in charge of these things. So look, one last question.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about the UK a lot, and which is perfect because it's really just an example of the rest of what's happening in Europe and North America. And here in this test case, we saw unions not working, streets not working, organizing not working. The media is shits.
Yeah.
And the political scene. How can we judge this walkout by Corbyn and Sultana from the Labour and this new party that they're forming? Is there hope in that?
No, absolutely none whatsoever. It's one of the most depressing, limp, wet walkouts I think I've ever seen in political history. Look, Corbyn was elected party leader, the Labour Party leader in 2015, and of course it was the great hope that Corbyn could become the Prime Minister of Britain. He would be the first Prime Minister that would recognise a Palestinian state. And yes, I remember, I was there at the time. Corbyn was one of our writers, actually, when I was at the Morning Star. And you saw this huge political energy, something I'd never seen or hadn't seen for a very, very, very long time. Young people engaging with politics. I saw people running to political meetings, which, I've never seen the likes of anything like this before. So it did create this huge wave of energy. But what happened to it in reality? Corbyn was weak as the Labour Party leader. He was bending every single time to what they call the centrists. He was bending every single time to the Zionists.
Oh yeah.
So that movement again became like this mass movement, became corralled into what they called momentum. I don't know where they get these terrible names from. It's like one of the shit names they come out with in The Apprentice. You know, the teams, Momentum. You know, but again,
it's always a euphemism of the opposite. Really,
yeah, exactly.
Momentum is to diffuse you from momentum.
But these things immediately come under very tight control. You know, momentum was diverted from this mass outward-looking political organisation into one that then solely focused on the internal politics of the Labour Party, you know, and parliamentary politics. So people naturally drifted away from it. You know, that excitement and that energy, that moment where you could have had some kind of political change.
He signed on to the IHRA, he
everything.
And now we see
everything.
He has kept these Zionists around him in this new
party. The exact same people that have led the masses to inglorious defeat after defeat. You know, they've snatched defeat from the jaws of victory time after time after time. And these people are, they're middle-class liberals, you know, is what they are. Grifters, people that make their living out of political organisations that don't have any kind of political vision or. And again, their role. You know, why is Corbyn walking out now? Why now? Why not? You know, this moment passed a long time ago, actually. And you know, Zara Sultana, great. So what? They're still wedded to the ideology of the Labour Party. They're just, you know, maybe, you know, a bit left-wing Labour, but you know, they're still stuck in this whole thing of like.
Just so we're not, you know, looked at as very negative.
Yeah.
Can we leave everybody with some positive thoughts of what could be a positive thing that people can do in the UK?
What people can do in the United Kingdom is start pushing for the exactly the kind of things that we've been talking about. Now you need to be taking control of these organisations, sweeping out the deadwood, sweeping out the leadership, acting independently of the leadership, go into your union branches and start passing motions demanding strike action in support of the people of Gaza. Go to the ports, organise mass action to stop the ships from leaving, block the trains, close down the munitions factories. These are things that can be done. This is, in essence, this is about where power in society lies. It doesn't lie in Parliament. It doesn't lie with MPs. It doesn't even lie with these organisations. Actually, power lies within the people themselves. Now, look, you can take Lebanon as an example. You have a government here, Joseph Aoun now Salam. I've never in my life seen a government prostrate itself so much to the United States. There is no independent government here in Lebanon. There is no independent army here in Lebanon. So the people have organised themselves. Why does Hezbollah exist? Because the people initially organised themselves in communities that were coming under attack. You know, there's not a predisposition. People don't suddenly, in Lebanon, they don't just like guns and shooting at people. They had to do this. They had to do this because of their neighbour. Their neighbour, you know, forced this upon them. They had to defend their community. So they came together and they formed, eventually, what we know now as Hezbollah, these resistance organisations.
And there's been many variations of this resistance in Lebanon and in the region since the beginnings of colonization. Obviously, it is very important for everybody to take radical action. With us, Steve Sweeney, revolutionary war correspondent for Russia Today.
Journalists, do your job. That's the most important thing. From journalist to journalist, do your job.
Do your job. To everybody, obviously, the West hasn't seen any revolution since the end of World War II. Not one state had a revolution, and we hope that this new generation would be awakened by the genocide in Gaza that has opened the eyes of everybody to the limitations of whatever systems they have. You have one more word?
I have one more thing that I want to say because it's very important, and I think this is about journalists doing their job. Now, just over a week or so ago, the US envoy, Tom Barak, came to Lebanon with his entourage of people, Morgan Ortagus and Lindsey Graham, and they virtually captured the presidential palace in Baghdad. Now, we saw what happened there. We saw Barak's comments where he described media workers and journalists as animalistic. But, and I'll say but, while the whole world was focusing on that, while Lebanese media was focusing on that, while social media was focusing on that, what they didn't do was actually get to the bones of what Barak was talking about. They didn't get behind the scenes of that. This is the danger of chasing social media trends and sound bites. Actually, the substance, once you cut through to the substance of what's happening, there is now on the table what I could only describe as a blueprint for ethnic cleansing. This Trump special economic zone is a real danger to Lebanon, a grave threat, a grave, grave danger. What we're talking about is the displacement of thousands of people, mainly Shia, but not only Shia, but mainly Shia people, from land, from their homes that they've lived in for generations after generation after generation. And what's being spoken about, Israel occupying permanently 14 villages, including Hula, Marun al-Ras, and other villages along the border.
And you know, the Israelis have already done this in Syria. There's a
exactly
whole
the same
area
thing.
that they have occupied has been ethnically cleansed without one word. And they're now conducting it in Gaza. We have to finish it because we're way past off the
But this
is
an important point, and this is why journalists should be doing their job. They should be reporting on this and what's happening, and they shouldn't be allowing this to happen.
They're not going to Gaza. They're not going to the south of Lebanon. They're not going to the south of Syria. We, as true journalists that understand our work, are going to these front lines. This is what makes you special, Steve Sweeney. You've been doing this for decades. Thank you very much for all this principled work. I ask you one more time to press the subscribe button on whatever social media platform you're watching this on, and to go to our website, freepalestine.video, to donate. I'm Laith Marouf. Behind the camera is Hadi Hotait and Rabih Ghannam. And until we see you next time, we bid you all a free Palestine.